Hey, what is up guys? Ghost Gaming here, and in this video I'm going to not be showing a lot of gameplay for this video. I'm going to be addressing a couple of problems that have lasted in the Genshin community for several months. Now, I've been in several heated Facebook debates, I've been in several civil debates on Discord and the Tectone server. Very nice people. I definitely recommend going to that Discord server if you enjoy Genshin and want to have more friends in Genshin. Very nice people over there. But a lot of the things that I've been seeing on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and sometimes Instagram is this. It's mainly around these couple of characters. Raiden Shogun, A, Ball, whatever you choose to call her. Zhongli is the biggest example, and I will get into Zhongli in a minute. And there's been a couple other characters that I can't think off the top of my head that are perfectly fine just the way they are, but yet still people feel the need to say, oh, but Mihoyo needs to buff this character because they don't do over 10 million damage. Like, come on. Now, the serious problem in the Genshin community, if Ball would stop talking over me. Alright, there we go. Now we're in a spot where she won't talk over me. Okay. So, the biggest problem in the Genshin community today is these people who look at leaks and see unconfirmed data. So that means they look at the beta testing for a character, right? Since Ball is released, I can use her as an example without Mihoyo striking down God's wrath on me. So back during the beta, Ball didn't ascend into energy recharge, she ascended into electro damage. People outraged over it, especially people in the beta community. When people saw leaks, people outraged. And she got a buff before she was released. And that means her ascension stat is energy recharge, which is huge because if we look at her kit in passive, which I believe her passive is this. Right here, yes. Each 1% above 100% energy recharge that Raiden Shogun possesses grants her 0.6 greater energy restoration from her ult and 0.4 electro damage bonus. Now, the people who are complaining that she needs a buff haven't put enough time, investment, or even built her properly. It's only been the third day since her release, and there is no way people have gotten her triple crowned already. Because, for one, her boss material, if I go to my bag and show you, her boss material is this. And where do you get this? Well, it's a new weekly boss here. And what does a weekly boss do? You can only clear it once per week and claim, if we go down here, you can get one of these three or two of these three. If you're lucky, you have a chance of getting a dream solvent, and you have a chance of getting any one of these, and a low drop chance of getting one of these. So, boss material, dream solvent, crystals, artifacts, and prototypes. Now, if a person gets two of these, one of these, and a dream solvent, they only have three of these. They can only take their talents up to 777 or 8 and 7 and 6. No way can anybody this week get her triple crowned or level 9 talents. Okay? Now, if we rewind the clocks back to Zhongli's release, because I need to get into his release before I talk about Ball. When Zhongli originally released, I agree. He needed a slight buff. All he needed, alright, if we look at his talents, if we look at this, if we hold, if we read this, right, all we need to see is when he's activating his Jade Shield, he will not take any staggering. What that means is when you go to Zhongli and you hold his E, when you apply that shield, if an enemy hits you, you will not cancel your E. You will just go through and apply the shield anyway. You'll just take the hit. Alright? That was the only buff Zhongli needed. But what did they do? They gave him a buff on attack. They gave him a buff on his defense shred. They gave him a buff on his shield and his ult and his auto attacks and his passives. They basically buffed him by 60% all around the board. Now, did Zhongli need this buff? No. So, you may be asking, why did people complain about the buff? Why did people complain that he needed a buff? So, let's look at other characters, right? And this will make sense. There are only 2 types of characters in this game. At a baseline level, at least. You have DPS and support. Alright, let's take a look at some fine uses of support. Bennett. Phenomenal support. Xingqiu. Phenomenal support. Jean. Phenomenal support. And the reason why I say support is because she heals and she DPSs. Any of these characters, if built correctly, can output damage. Doesn't matter if they are 5-star or 4-star. Doesn't matter if you have a 5-star weapon or a 4-star weapon. Okay? So, when these people post on Reddit about these support characters needing to output damage so high, like Eula, like Tartaglia, like Xiao, let's see, like Kaching, let's keep it going, like Kazuha, like Hu Tao, like Ayaka. Okay? So, even like Diluc. So, what's the difference between support characters and DPS characters in the meta? So, a DPS character like Diluc, right? We're going to use Diluc as an example because Diluc has fallen off in the meta very recently. With DPS-oriented characters, there is one fatal flaw with them. And it's the main reason why I stopped running main DPS and went to full support DPS team. Okay? So, with Diluc, he cannot do anything other than output damage. Now, some people may like that. Some people may want to play for big numbers, and that is perfectly okay. But when MiHoYo, which is, for those who don't know, the company who created this game, when MiHoYo releases a character and advertises them as a support character, they need to stay as a support character. Not have what Zhongli was done to. Alright? Now, the fantastic example of a well-rounded support character is Kaedahara Kazuha. Alright? Now, this is a fine example of what character investment done right should look like. Alright, and I'm just gonna quickly go through my build on Kazuha so you can just get a general idea of how characters are built, right? So, when I say Kazuha is a support, I'm not meaning he is like Diona, or Bennett, or Jean. Kazuha is the type of support that is known as a sub-DPS unit. Now, if you don't have C1 for Kazuha, which means your Chiayaburu, which is your E skill, your cooldown is decreased by 10%, and using your ult will reset the cooldown of your E. Okay? Phenomenal for sub DPS. And even still, I can run Kazuha multiple different ways. There are multiple different ways to build this character. Now, what's the biggest difference between him and Diluc? Diluc can only output damage, meanwhile Kazuha can do multiple other things. So what do you think will happen in the meta when they release a character that can basically be a jack of all trades versus somebody who can do one thing? The character who can do more things and be more useful in multiple different ways is going to be on more teams. For instance, Kazuha, his Ascension stat I can't show you because I have him maxed out already, but his Ascension stat is Elemental Mastery. Alright? Now, that means his kit scales off of Elemental Mastery. But you don't have to build him based off of his kit. Now, if you want to proc swirl damage and use him as strictly EM support, that way you can have your main DPS like Hu Tao or Tartaglia do more damage, then what you would do is run one of two weapons, Alley Flash or Iron Sting. I don't have Iron Sting, but I do have an Alley Flash. So if I so chose to, I can make my Kazuha full Elemental Mastery build. That means if I go to my artifacts, my sands, my circlet, my goblet, my feather, and my flower all focus EM. Now we get close to 800 to 700 Elemental Mastery. That's a good use of a support because not only is he buffing all of the other characters, he is also buffing himself. Now, because I rambled a little bit too much, I need to kind of move along with this, right? So, the reason why Kazuha is such a good DPS, right? And good sub DPS is because of his kit. He can do multiple things. Now, let's look at another character who can do multiple things. Now, we're going to look at pre-buff Zhongli, right? So, all these stats are not going to matter for what I'm talking about right in this moment. Okay? So, pre-buff Zhongli was a phenomenal support. And so far, all of the Archons have been support units. And guess who stayed in the meta longer than any other character? Zhongli. Guess who is the second character who stayed in the meta longest? Venti. So that shows that the Archons are meant to be supports and they stay in the meta longer. Okay? So let's get into Ball, or A, or Raiden Shogun, whichever you prefer, and why people think she needs a buff like Zhongli. Keep in mind, Zhongli got a buff on every single stat. That means his auto, his E, his alt, and all of the stats that you see on the main attribute screen got a 10% buff. Overall, he got a huge spike in power. Before he could hit maybe 50k damage if built properly, now if built properly with a Staff of Homa and full HP build on Noblesse and Archaic Petra, can hit for over 100k damage. That is unnecessary amounts of DPS for a support character. Is the buff nice? Yes. But was it needed? No. Now, what did that buff do to the community? That buff necessarily introduced something that gacha games have had a huge problem with over the course of its entire existence. And that is something called power creeping. Now, for those who aren't into gacha, what power creeping is, right? Let's just say let's say I'm Mihoyo, right? And I release an animo character that can pull characters into a specific location like Sucrose or Venti, right? And I advertise that character as the new 5-star or the new 4-star that can do this, and people will buy it, right? Because it has never been done before in the game. Well, given maybe a couple patch releases, maybe wait all the way up to the end of the 2-point patch release, right? And not 2-point, but we reached the end of the 1.0 or that entire first patch, right? When Kazuha released, Sucrose and Venti, especially Sucrose, got power crept immensely because Kazuha can do everything that Sucrose can do, but better. Okay? So let's look at another character that got extremely power crept. Fischl. Alright? Now, you may be thinking, who power crept everybody's best girl, Fischl? Well, if we exit out of here and go here, if it wants to load. Come on, game, load. There we go. It's Kujo Sara. She can do basically everything that Fischl can do, but better. Alright? Now let's look at Raiden Shogun. If I pop her E skill, right, it creates something that I can then summon in front of me and it is attached to me. Well, if I put Fischl on the team, which I'm not going to because I don't want to show my account info, I can basically summon an Electro Bird that is right next to me, and I can then move from that spot and resummon it. Okay, does that make sense? So basically, Ball power crept Fischl and inadvertently power crept Kujo Sara. Alright, now, here's the thing that people have been saying that Ball needs a buff. HP, attack, and then needs better energy recharge scaling, needs better electro damage, needs better DPS output, right? Where people have got it all wrong is not that Ball herself needs a huge buff. Now I will admit, she needs a slight buff. Just a slight buff. What needs a huge buff is the Electro Element. And the reason why the Electro Element needs a huge buff, the current Electro, not the current Electro, but the current elemental reactions that are meta in the game are based around Pyro and Hydro and Pyro and Cryo. So Vaporize and Melt. Those comps can do ridiculous amount of damage, and when people found out that that comp can do that much damage, they didn't want to switch. And when they saw new characters being released that did less than what they originally hoped for, they whine on Reddit until they get their way. When what poses a problem with that, though, is power creeping. Basically, what power creeping does, it creates a sense of fear of missing out. So what fear of missing out is let's just say I release one character and for their release they are the best character in the game. For instance, let's look at Ganyu, right? When Ganyu released, she was regarded as the best character in the game, hands down, because of the amount of DPS that she can output, even as a support. But she fell off in the meta because just cryo, her kit didn't work well with melt combos because you could reverse melt, but you would be losing out on 30% damage by reverse melting. So, why is electro elemental reactions so weak? The only electro elemental reactions that are worth even your time is Electro and Hydro, and Electro and Cryo. So I think it's Electro Supercharge and Superconduct. So what Electro Supercharge does is if you have, let's say, Ball, and let's find good old Tortellini, and Tartaglia, if I use Ball's E, and then use Tartaglia's E, I can infinitely proc lightning arcing. What that means is any character that gets the hydro status debuff on them and have electro status debuff at the same time, whatever character is around the first character that you hit with that electro will then arc to the surrounding characters. Now what Superconduct does is, let's just say we use Ball and Eula, right? Because Eula is known as a cryo fizz DPS. So you could build her two ways. You could build her cryo or you could build her fizz. Her best way of being built is fizz with all of her talents going into her ult and auto attacks. Okay? So what I would do for that comp is use Ball's E, then Eula's E to proc Superconduct. Now, what happens when you proc Superconduct? Physical Reds gets shredded. So that means your white damage, so the damage that you do by doing this, mouse 1, will then be greatly buffed. So, why does she need a buff? It's not her that needs a buff, it's the electro element itself. The reactions itself needs to be buffed to a standard of where all the other elements are in the game. Anemo, for instance, got a huge buff with crowd control. Anemo is now known as the crowd control element. Because what I can do with Anemo, right, let's just say Kazuha, right, I can just do that, and you see that wind vortex that pops up? Any small enemy, so any human-sized enemy, will then get pulled into that, and all of the enemies that you hit with that E will be in one spot for you. Okay? And what's really good about Anemo is Swirl and Infusion. So, Electro barely got a buff. It was just a slight damage increase. Alright? So what Electro Element needs for a buff is damage increase. What she needs for a buff is only on this. And it says, while in this state, Raiden Shogun will wield her Tachi in battle, while her normal, charge, and plunging attacks will be infused with electro damage, which cannot be overridden by Bennett C6, by the way. When such attacks hit opponents, she will regenerate energy for all nearby party members. Yada yada yada. Basically, if you read through all this and just read this at the bottom, Raiden Shogun's normal, charge, and plunging attacks while in her ult will be considered as elemental burst damage. Now, tell me if this makes sense to you. This is the one thing that I agree with that she needs a buff on, and that I think the whole Genshin community as a collective thinks she needs a buff on. If you pair up Ball with Xingqiu, if we look at his ult, your active character's normal attacks will trigger consecutive sword rain attacks, so your ult. So basically Xingqiu will just fire rain swords at you just by pressing mouse 1, right? And this works with her. But that shouldn't make sense because this is considered as elemental burst damage. But in reality, you're still using your normal and charged and plunging attacks. So why doesn't it work with Beidu's ult? Alright, now what Beidu's ult is, when normal and charged attacks hit, they create a lightning discharge that can jump between opponents, dealing electro damage. So, for those who are pulling Ball and thought that they can use her with their Beidu, they can't, because this ability is practically useless because you can't proc it with Ball's ultimate. So that renders Beidu with Ball completely useless. That is the one thing that needs a buff, is the fact that if she can do the same thing, but it can activate with Xingqiu, why can't she do it with Beidu? Basically, that is my entire rant for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and sat through it and understood the dilemma that this community is in. If we keep going and saying and whining to MiHoYo that these characters need a buff, it's going to create a problem in the community that will kill the game quicker. Because people will get so anxious about the new character coming out and having the fear of missing out and wasting their money and getting addicted to spending on this game. And I will admit, I have fell victim to that a while ago. It wasn't until I pulled Kazuha that I finally realized majority of my characters I regret pulling. Like for instance, I regret Eula, I regret Zhao, I regret Ayaka, I regret Diluc. You know, I regret a lot of characters that I spent money on, and especially weapons. I regret pulling so many ammo spos. Granted, I was going for a different weapon, but I still shouldn't have summoned. I regret pulling for Staff of Homa and getting 4 Wolf's Gravestones. Waste of money, because these two characters I don't use at all. And if you look, 80 and 50, I wasted material. So you see, that's the problem that this generates in our community for Genshin Impact. It creates the fear of missing out, and it creates a dichotomy that literally just preys upon people wasting their money on a mobile game. Now, if you're a content creator and you do this for content, or you just simply like spending on the game and you are financially stable enough to spend on the game, then you can. I'm a content creator, so I have the slight excuse of saying later on down the road, if I get to a point to where I can make this my full-time job, all that I spent on this game was a business expense. It's copium as fuck, but that's just the reality of it. If you are an average Joe, or just an average person that just plays the game, and just wants to have fun with the game, don't waste your money on characters you don't absolutely 100% want and know that you want on your team. Because if you do that, you will be utterly disappointed with the character, right? So if you don't just save your money for a character that you absolutely want and you just spend on every banner to get every character because you're a meta slave, you're going to ultimately be unhappy with the characters that you wasted your money on. And I've seen too many people have that happen to them. It's genuinely sad. I've seen people on YouTube and Twitch literally lose their houses over spending on this game. There's been people on Facebook who lost their houses and ruined their relationships for being a meta slave on this game. Now, do I love this game and support this game? 100%. This, by far, and this may seem very controversial to a lot of, hardcore gamers out there, but this has been the one game that I have been 100% happy with, majority-wise, at least, especially after becoming a whale. I've been 100% happy with this game and what they're doing with this game without the input of other people in the community that are just forcing, just unnecessary power creeping. This is the one game that I've enjoyed more in my life since Halo 4's release. And for those who are in my personal life, which I know some people are who are subbed to my channel, know that Halo 4 was my game. That was the game that I dominated in. So to have another game that gave me a sense of feeling like I'm at home is very rare. So I don't want this game to end anytime soon, but looking at how the community is treating it and wanting every character to out-damage the last character like it's Dokkan Battle or One Piece Treasure Cruise are only killing the game faster. Moral of the story is, only pull for characters that you know you want 100% and that you need for your team 100%, and play for fun. Don't be a meta slave. Don't waste unnecessary money on this game. Pull for who you want and be happy with what you get. Anyways, this has been Ghost Gaming signing out. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm sorry if this was a lengthy video. I needed to get this off my chest because it is a huge problem going on in the Genshin community today. I hope you guys liked this video and sat through it all. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next Genshin video or Minecraft video. Bye, guys.